while I have you here before I hop into the computer system, we may be bringing up the postal bill here in the next couple of weeks, and in Section 102 of that bill, there's a provision that would provide basically service years of credit for postal employees, phantom average salaries. That we did request from OPM some information on terms of what that would cost, and there were actually ranges. It was intended to be capped at $25,000, but your agency provided us information in an email that showed those awards could be as high as $280,000. We also got a memo, an email from your agency stating your opposition to granting those types of phantom average salary credits in any kind of retirement buyout. I just kind of want to get you on the record. I mean, that's your position. I mean, it would be a very bad precedent being set, is I think what your agency thought.
Yes, sir. And I've not been fully briefed in great detail on the issue, but my staff tells me that it is our policy and an agreement. We're in agreement with you on the phantom payments.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Let's delve into computer systems. The numbers, Mr. McFarland, you're quoting in terms of the number of systems involved. I used to actually program in Fortran. I use the card decks. It is somewhat jaw-dropping that the federal government is that antiquated. Is the retirement system of the federal government that vastly different than private sector retirement plans that in some way, shape, or form we can't modify basically, computer systems used in the private sector to handle the federal government as well? I mean, is it just that different? Or maybe that'd be for Ms. Melvin.
We have not looked at the retirement system relative to what the private sector's done, but what I would say is that the types of concerns that we saw in overall relative to managing the retirement modernization initiative are the types of concerns that are prevalent at many other agencies, but they are overcomable. They can be overcome if the essential management capabilities are in place. From the standpoint of the technology itself, certainly there are complications when you're dealing with very old code and you're dealing with many systems and the hundreds of interfaces that are involved with OPM systems. Across the 20-plus years, I don't believe that it would be impossible for them to overcome that and develop a system. However, as has been alluded to in my statement as well as in the statements of the others, the deficit in the IT management capability is very extreme at OPM, at least from what we saw through our work. The types of recommendations that we made are recommendations that collectively need to be addressed in an institutionalized way at the agency. Starting, I think it's very commendable that Director Berry has taken ownership of the problem and has recognized the severity of it. I think it's also important that he talked to the need to involve others, a chief technology officer, for example. Those types of figures are going to be play a critical role from a leadership perspective to try to help get a culture in place at OPM where they can start to, first of all, assess their capabilities and try to move forward in understanding what their needs are, developing a clear vision of what that is, and then working toward that through a defined and concrete plan of action that would take them there.
Yeah, Director Berry, go ahead.
Senator, if I could, you would think with, having basically two core systems, the civil service retirement system, which was the old civil service retirement, a defined benefit, pretty straightforward calculation. Now about 15% of our workforce is under that. We walked away from that back in 1984 and reformed it and created the new federal employment retirement system, which sort of has a three-legged stool approach to it: Social Security, a thrift savings plan, and a much smaller defined benefit portion. Those are the two core lanes that, if you will, that we have to operate in. And when the private sector, the last automation attempt came in, they had an off-the-shelf system that they thought, well, this was similar to, the lanes that they were operating in. But what they encountered when they came in, the Inspector General mentioned 500 rules and modifications in law and regulation over the years that have accumulated. Things like, a different law enforcement officer pay calculation, a different firefighter calculation, an air traffic controller calculation, part-time service calculations, different doctor, dentist, surgeon calculations. You could go on and on and on with those list of what those 500 calculations are. And what they found was they could not modify the off-the-shelf system to accommodate all of these unique variables that existed into the federal process. And so that's why, in looking at the learned experience from that most recent, that they took that behind the barn just before and shot it just before I walked in the door. So when lessons learned was I read that file this first month on the job and said, we are not repeating this. We're not going to try to automate the whole thing. It is just too complicated. And so that is what motivated my system to look at my approach of this pieces that make sense, that we can control, that we can, there will be private sector solutions to a lot of these pieces, and we'll be able to bring them on a lot faster with a lot more easy application of GAO's principles than we will if we try to do it all at once.
Was it ever considered taking these off-the-shelf systems and putting them down at the agency level, so you'd have fewer of those variables with?
The problem, Senator, is that this is one of the reasons we have problems sometimes in getting a complete file to just make the adjudication. Once we have a complete file, it's hours to process it, and it's not days or weeks. It's getting that file complete. And so what each agency would then face, if you devolved it to each agency, is most federal employees are moving around during the course of their career. They have military service, they have National Guard service, they might have worked for the Postal Service, they might have part-time service, and they'll have it with multiple agencies. And there is not, all of the paperwork for that service lies with those original agencies. It doesn't build a file that follows the employee as they go, unless if there's, federal employees who are savvy do. They maintain their file. And for those, we're able to rebuild the file very quickly or make sure it's complete. But otherwise, we need to go back and, before we can adjudicate it, make sure we can verify that service. And sometimes people's memories will be foggy farther back you go, and they'll think that was full-time service when in reality it was part-time service, and the credit is different. And we have to verify that before making that determination.
I'm beginning to understand your quandary.
Thank you very much, Senator Johnson. Let me call on